Good day. I'd like to introduce your main speaker for today. He's appeared in more than 150 movies and television shows, including Every Which Way But Loose with Clint Eastwood, The Sting with Paul Newman and Robert Redford, Papillon with Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, and the television miniseries Roots. But first and foremost, he's the husband for 26 years of a wonderful woman by the name of Gwen, the father of 6 beautiful children ranging in age from 5 to 25, and the grandfather of 4. He was a member of the Special Forces during the Vietnam era and later became a fellow with the Chalcedon Foundation for 7 years, which is a Christian think tank operated by Dr. R.J. Rushtoney in Northern California. In October of 1995, he was unanimously elected the national spokesman for the American Jural Society and is now the host of the American Jural Society Hour, a nightly 1-hour nationwide radio show on the Media Bypass Radio Network. And finally, I would like to add that throughout the history of the world, there have been many political and religious reformations. In all of these reformations, there have always been special men with special words, and these men all had one thing in common. They knew that their lives were not their own, but belonged to the Lord. These men included, of course, the Apostle John, John Wycliffe in the 14th century, John Calvin and John Knox in the 17th century, John Adams and John Hancock in the 18th century, and John Randolph in the 19th century. And in the new Reformation, which is beginning to sweep our country, we have John William Saunders III, better known as John Quade. Let's give him a warm welcome.
I was in Fort Worth yesterday shooting a television thing for a friend of mine. And on the way out there, Randy and I were driven out there by a lady who conducts tour guides here in Dallas and in Fort Worth and elsewhere. And I've known this lady for some time, a couple of years anyway. And we were talking about the differences between Dallas and Fort Worth and everything. And I think the one difference that summed up everything was that in Dallas, what they call sushi, they call bait in Fort Worth. Now, that does speak to a certain extent to a level, I guess, of sophistication in Dallas. And it's been my experience over the past 2 or 3 years since I started speaking on behalf of the law reform movement, that there was a level of sophistication in Dallas that was not normal in other cities. There was also something else, which for me was far more important, and that was that the people in Texas, as a rule, and I know everybody and his brother takes advantage of Texas and the people of Texas, and when dealing with them in film and television, and tries to make you all out to be something you're not. The one thing I enjoyed about coming to Texas is Texans. There really is something unique in Texas. And that uniqueness alone is worthy of being a separate nation and separate republic. Because of it came into the Union after 1840. There's a spirit in Texas that kind of motivates Texans to be a little bolder than some other people and to do things that most other people in other states wouldn't even consider doing. I don't know many people that'll walk into a court with an abatement in their hand and walk right up to the judge while he's in the middle of a session with somebody else and hand him the abatement and walk out. But they do that in Texas. See, normally in California, they get a sheriff's deputy or something to serve the process, or they'll send it by registered mail, but not in Texas. And in California, people kind of dance around the religious question sometimes, and the impact of Christianity and its basis in law and the common law. But in Texas, they don't make any bones about it. and they don't hesitate to express the God they believe in, and to do so honestly and forthrightly. That, to me, is special. But I think every Texan, when they come up to me, they always ask me the same thing. They say, "John, where are you from?" And I say, well, I'm a Kansan by birth, a Texan by choice, and a Californian by the providence of God. Take your choice. Because Texas is kind of my adopted state. I enjoy coming here, and I enjoy being with Texans. I've shot movies here, and I've lectured here, and I've taught the best I knew, and it was always seemed to be enough. No matter how much I messed up on my facts and figures, I always had people in the audience who were willing to listen, and listen good. And what I have to tell you tonight is something that you better listen good to, real good, because it affects everything that happens in civil government in this nation. But it also does something else. It also explains why the non-statutory abatement that principally Randy Lee and others developed, I was involved primarily. My involvement was just sitting at the typewriter, banging away and banging away and banging away, and Randy said, no, John, make that italicized right there, or you want to bold this section right here where it says thirdly and everything. I said, sure thing. And I'm sitting there beating away and typing all the notes, and like when we did the non-statutory abatement handbook, there's an appendix in there, in Appendix A in the back of the Book of the Hundreds. And it's called The Nature of Emergency Powers and Martial Rule. Randy and I wrote that in about 4 days. And there's 102 footnotes in there. And somebody asked me one time, why so many footnotes? And I said, well, I told Randy when we started writing that essay that it was to provide some kind of background and logical structure as to the present system of government, to explain what it is and how it came to be, and why it's essential that we start jural societies based on God's law and the common law and maxims of law, and also why we as individuals must learn again the old ways, as it says in Scripture, and why we as American people must learn how to do the common law process correctly when it really is common law process. There's a lot out there that styles itself as common law process, but in fact isn't. And based on my experience that Randy mentioned before at the Chalcedon Foundation, Dr. R.J. Rushton would always tell me, he says, John, an essay is no good without plenty of substantial footnotes, because he says modern man is incapable of accepting and digesting a logical argument. He wants some authority to show him that this doesn't rely on the writer's opinion, it relies on excellent authority. Well, I was satisfied with just using biblical verses, but Dr. Rushton, he said, the only thing that works and gets their attention is to bury them in footnotes. Well, when we wrote this essay in the back of the American Jural Society handbook, I happened to mention this to Randy Lee, and for the next 4 days, that's what he proceeded to do. And in my mom's bedroom there, a spare bedroom in my mom's place, it looked like a snowstorm hit the place, because there was little stacks of paper all over the place and on top of the computer, and oftentimes under the keyboard hanging out where I could type in a quote, and then there was in the window, and he had pieces stuck in the window and everything else. And for 4 days, while I typed, Randy sit there and buried me in footnotes. So the real research in that essay goes to Randy Lee, because he and the other guys, there's about a dozen of us in California and the West and elsewhere, who